What if I told you that the difference between those who dominate their field and those who struggle isn't talent, luck, or even hard work? What if I told you that elite performers, the top 1% in business, sports, leadership, and life, operate with a completely different mental operating system than everyone else? While most people rely on motivation, hope, and outdated strategies, peak performers have cracked the code of human psychology. They've discovered the hidden mental patterns, cognitive frameworks, and performance principles that allow them to consistently operate at levels most people can't even imagine. This isn't about working harder. This isn't about grinding until you burn out. This is about rewiring your brain to think, process, and perform like the elite minds who shape our world. The human brain is the most sophisticated performance machine ever created, yet 99% of people never learn how to use it properly. They let their minds run on autopilot, controlled by outdated programming, fear-based thinking, and limitations they never chose for themselves. But the top performers, they've taken control of their mental machinery. Today, you're going to discover the psychological secrets that separate peak performers from everyone else. You'll learn how elite minds process pressure, make decisions, and maintain laser focus when others crumble. You'll uncover the cognitive strategies that turn ordinary people into extraordinary achievers. But here's the truth that changes everything. Peak performance isn't a destination, it's a way of thinking. It's not something you achieve once and keep forever. It's a mental discipline you develop, refine, and strengthen every single day. By the time you finish this audiobook, you won't just understand how elite minds work, you'll be an elite mind. You'll have the psychological tools, mental frameworks, and performance strategies to dominate any challenge, crush any goal, and win in any arena. Are you ready to unlock the psychology of peak performance and join the ranks of those who don't just dream about success, they engineer it? There's a moment in every elite performer's journey when they realize something that changes everything. It's not when they win their first championship, close their first $1 million deal, or get promoted to the C-suite. It's the moment they understand that success isn't about what they do, it's about how they think. Most people believe that peak performers are just like everyone else, but with better skills, more talent, or superior training. This is completely wrong. Elite performers operate with fundamentally different mental programming. They don't just perform differently, they think differently, to process information differently, and relate to pressure, failure, and success in ways that would seem alien to the average person. The first distinguishing characteristic of elite minds is their relationship with discomfort. While most people spend their lives avoiding pain, uncertainty, and challenge, peak performers have conditioned themselves to seek it out. They understand that comfort is the enemy of growth, and they've rewired their brains to interpret discomfort as a signal that they're expanding their capabilities. When faced with a difficult situation, the average person asks, "How can I avoid this?" The elite performer asks, "How can I use this?" This isn't positive thinking. It's a fundamental difference in how their brains are programmed to interpret reality. Peak performers have also mastered what psychologists call cognitive flexibility, the ability to shift between different mental frameworks depending on the situation. While most people have rigid thinking patterns that trap them in limited responses, elite minds can instantly switch between analytical thinking, creative problem-solving, emotional intelligence, and strategic planning as needed. Think about it. When a crisis hits, most people become overwhelmed because they're trying to process everything through one mental framework. Elite performers remain calm because they can immediately shift to crisis management mode, accessing different cognitive resources that most people don't even know they have. Another critical difference is their relationship with failure. Most people experience failure as a threat to their identity. When they fail, their inner dialogue becomes, "I'm not good enough, I can't do this, or maybe I should quit." Elite performers have completely reframed failure in their minds. To them, Failure isn't a judgment on their worth. It's data. It's feedback. It's information they can use to calibrate their approach. This isn't just a mindset shift. It's a neurological rewiring. Elite performers have trained their brains to process setbacks through the prefrontal cortex, the rational brain, rather than the amygdala, the emotional brain. This allows them to extract lessons, make adjustments, and move forward without the emotional baggage that paralyzes most people. Elite minds also operate with what researchers call deliberate practice, but it goes deeper than just focused training. Peak performers have developed the ability to maintain conscious awareness during performance. While most people go on autopilot during familiar tasks, elite performers stay mentally engaged, constantly analyzing, adjusting, and optimizing their approach in real time. Perhaps most importantly, elite performers understand that their mind is their primary tool, and like any tool, it must be maintained, sharpened, and continuously upgraded. They don't just rely on natural ability, they systematically develop their cognitive capabilities, emotional regulation, and mental stamina with the same precision that an athlete trains their body. The research is clear. When neuroscientists study the brains of elite performers across different fields, from chess grandmasters to Navy SEALs to Fortune 500 CEOs, they find similar patterns of neural activity, cognitive processing, and mental architecture. The elite mind isn't born, it's built. So what does this mean for you? It means that peak performance isn't reserved for a select few with special genetics or unique circumstances. It's available to anyone willing to understand and implement the psychological principles that govern elite achievement. Asterisk. The question isn't whether you have the potential to think like an elite performer. The question is whether you're willing to abandon the mental patterns that keep you average and embrace the cognitive discipline that creates champions. Your brain is either your greatest asset or your biggest limitation. The difference between these two possibilities isn't genetics, age, or intelligence, it's understanding. How to optimize your neural architecture for peak performance. Neuroscientists have discovered something revolutionary. The brains of elite performers are physically different from those of average performers. This isn't because they were born special. It's because they've systematically rewired their neural networks through specific mental training protocols. When researchers scan the brains of world-class musicians, they find enlarged areas responsible for fine motor control and auditory processing. When they study elite athletes, they discover enhanced regions for spatial awareness and decision-making under pressure. When they examine top business leaders, they find strengthened networks for pattern recognition and emotional regulation. The key insight is this: your brain is neuroplastic, meaning it physically reshapes itself based on how you use it. Every thought you think, every skill you practice, and every mental pattern you repeat is literally sculpting your brain structure. Peak performers understand this at an intuitive level. They don't just train their craft, they train their brains. They engage in what neuroscientists call cognitive cross-training, deliberately developing mental capacities that most people leave to chance. One of the most important discoveries in performance neuroscience is the role of the default mode network, DMN. This is the brain network that's active when you're not focused on a specific task, when your mind is wandering, daydreaming, or running on autopilot. In most people, the DMN is dominated by self-referential thinking, worry, and mental chatter that drains cognitive resources. Elite performers have learned to optimize their DMN instead of mental noise. Their default state is characterized by what researchers call relaxed awareness. It's a state of calm alertness that allows for rapid cognitive switching and enhanced pattern recognition. They've essentially reprogrammed their brain's screensaver. Asterisk. This optimization happens through specific practices that elite performers use consistently. Focused attention training. While most people believe they can multitask effectively, neuroscience proves that divided attention leads to decreased performance across all tasks. Elite performers train their ability to sustain focused attention for extended periods, literally strengthening the neural networks responsible for concentration. Stress inoculation. Peak performers deliberately expose themselves to controlled stress to build mental resilience. This process, called hormetic stress, actually strengthens the brain's ability to function under pressure by improving the efficiency of stress response systems. Cognitive load management. Elite minds have learned to distinguish between essential and non-essential mental processing. They offload routine decisions like what to wear or eat to automatic systems, preserving cognitive resources for high-impact thinking. Mental recovery protocols. Just as physical muscles need recovery time, the brain requires periods of restoration to maintain peak function. Elite performers have developed sophisticated recovery strategies that optimize neural repair and enhancement. The prefrontal cortex, often called the brain's CEO, plays a crucial role in peak performance. This region is responsible for executive functions like decision-making, impulse control, and working memory. Elite performers have typically developed enhanced prefrontal cortex function through specific training protocols. But here's what most people don't understand. The prefrontal cortex is easily depleted by decision fatigue, emotional stress, and cognitive overload. Peak performers protect this precious resource through strategic mental energy management. They eliminate unnecessary decisions, automate routine behaviors, and create environmental systems that reduce cognitive friction. Another critical neural system for peak performance is the brain's reward circuitry. Most people have hijacked reward systems that respond more strongly to immediate gratification than long-term achievement. Elite performers have recalibrated their reward systems to find genuine satisfaction in the process of improvement rather than just outcomes. This neurological rewiring explains why elite performers can maintain motivation during long periods without external validation. Their brains have been conditioned to release dopamine in response to quality effort, skill development, and incremental progress rather than just final results. The research also reveals that peak performers have enhanced interoceptive awareness, the ability to sense internal bodily signals. This heightened body awareness allows them to detect early signs of fatigue, stress, or optimal arousal states, enabling micro-adjustments that maintain performance quality. Understanding these neurological principles isn't just academic, it's practical. When you know how your brain creates peak performance, you can systematically develop the neural architecture that supports elite achievement. You stop leaving your mental development to chance and start engineering your cognitive capabilities. With precision, the elite mind isn't a mystery. It's a masterpiece of deliberate neural sculpting. And now that you understand the neuroscience behind it, you can begin building your own. Elite performers don't make better decisions because they're smarter. They make better decisions because they think through better frameworks. While most people rely on intuition, emotion, or limited experience to guide their choices, peak performers have developed sophisticated mental models that allow them to process complex information, anticipate consequences, and choose optimal strategies with remarkable consistency. A mental model is a cognitive framework that helps you understand how something works. It's a thinking tool that simplifies complexity and reveals patterns that would otherwise be invisible. Elite performers in every field have mastered the art of mental model collection and application, giving them a decisive advantage in decision-making, speed, and accuracy. Consider how a chess grandmaster thinks differently from a novice. The novice sees individual pieces and considers a few possible moves. The grandmaster sees patterns, recognizes strategic themes, and can instantly evaluate thousands of positions based on well-developed mental models of pawn structures, piece coordination, and endgame principles. They're not necessarily more intelligent. They're thinking through superior frameworks. This same principle applies across all domains of peak performance. Elite business leaders use mental models for market analysis, competitive strategy, and organizational behavior. Top athletes employ mental models for technique optimization, game theory, and performance under pressure. World-class investors rely on mental models for risk assessment, value identification, and market psychology. The most powerful mental models used by elite performers include first principles thinking, instead of reasoning, by analogy or accepting. Conventional wisdom. Elite performers break down complex problems to their fundamental components. They ask, what do we know to be true, rather than what has worked before. This allows them to discover innovative solutions that others miss because they're not constrained by existing approaches. Systems thinking. Peak performers understand that everything exists within interconnected systems. They don't just focus on individual events, they examine the underlying structures, feedback loops, and leverage points that drive systemic behavior. This prevents them from applying band-aid solutions to systemic problems. Probabilistic thinking. While most people think in absolutes, elite performers think in probabilities. They understand that uncertainty is the only certainty, and they make decisions based on likelihood assessments rather than false certainty. This allows them to calibrate their confidence appropriately and make better bets. Inversion. Elite performers regularly use inversion, thinking about what could go wrong instead of just what could go right. By imagining failure scenarios, they identify potential pitfalls and design strategies to avoid them. This mental model prevents many costly mistakes that derail average performers. Second-order thinking. While most people consider only the immediate consequences of their actions, peak performers think several steps ahead. They ask, and then what? Repeatedly, tracing the chain of consequences to understand the true impact of their decisions. Opportunity cost. Elite performers understand that every choice involves trade-offs. When evaluating options, they don't just consider what they might gain, they carefully examine what they might be giving up. This prevents them from being seduced by shiny objects that distract from higher value activities. Mental model stacking. Perhaps most importantly, elite performers don't rely on single mental models. They combine multiple frameworks to create more robust and nuanced understanding. They might use systems thinking to understand a problem, probabilistic thinking to assess risks, and inversion to identify potential failures, all within the same decision-making process. The development of mental models isn't accidental among elite performers. They systematically study how the best thinkers in various fields approach problems. They read biographies of great leaders, study case studies of successful strategies, and extract the underlying thinking patterns that led to breakthrough results. They also engage in what cognitive scientists call deliberate reflection, consciously analyzing their own decision-making processes to identify which mental models worked well and which need refinement. This metacognitive awareness allows them to continuously upgrade their thinking frameworks. Elite performers also understand the limitations of mental models. They know that every model is incomplete and that over-reliance on any single framework can create blind spots. They remain intellectually humble, constantly testing their assumptions and updating their models. Based on new evidence, this intellectual agility is what allows peak performers to thrive in rapidly changing environments, while others become obsolete. They don't cling to outdated mental models out of emotional attachment. They ruthlessly update their frameworks when reality demands it. Most importantly, elite performers have internalized their mental models to the point where superior thinking becomes automatic. They don't have to consciously remember to use these frameworks. They've become integrated into their cognitive architecture through deliberate practice and repetition. The tragedy is that most people never develop sophisticated mental models. They rely on simplistic thinking patterns that were adequate for simpler times, but inadequate for complex, modern challenges. They make decisions based on surface-level information, emotional reactions, or social pressure, rather than deep understanding of underlying principles. But this represents an enormous opportunity. By studying and implementing the mental models used by elite performers, you can dramatically upgrade your decision-making capabilities. You can start seeing patterns that others miss, anticipating consequences that others ignore, and making choices that others can't even conceive. The elite mind isn't just more knowledgeable, it's more systematically organized. It operates through proven frameworks that consistently produce superior results. And these frameworks can be learned, practiced, and mastered by anyone willing to invest in upgrading their cognitive toolkit. Asterisk, in a world designed to fragment your attention, the ability to maintain deep focus has become the ultimate competitive advantage. While the average person checks their phone 96 times per day and can only sustain concentrated attention for 8 seconds, elite performers have mastered the art of sustained, laser-focused attention that allows them to operate at cognitive levels most people never experience. This isn't just about productivity or time management. It's about accessing higher orders of mental processing that are only available when your brain can dedicate its full resources to a single task. Neuroscientists have discovered that deep focus literally changes your brain chemistry, increasing the production of neurotransmitters that enhance learning, memory, and creative insight. Elite performers understand that attention is their most valuable resource, and they protect it with the same vigilance that a Fortune 500 company protects its most critical assets. They've developed sophisticated attention management systems that most people have never even considered. The first principle of elite focus is understanding the different types of attention and how to optimize each. 1. Focused attention. This is your ability to concentrate on a specific task while filtering out distractions. Elite performers have trained their focused attention to operate at intensities and durations that would exhaust most people. They can maintain peak concentration for hours, not minutes. Open monitoring. This is a relaxed awareness that allows you to notice important information in your environment without losing focus on your primary task. Elite performers develop this to maintain situational awareness while engaged in complex activities. Meta-attention. This is your awareness of your own attention, knowing when you're focused, when you're distracted, and how to consciously redirect your mental resources. Elite performers have exceptional meta-attention, allowing them to catch and correct attention drift before it impacts performance. The neuroscience of elite focus reveals several key principles that peak performers use to maintain cognitive superiority. Single tasking. Mastery. While average performers believe they can multitask effectively, elite performers understand that the brain can only truly focus on one cognitively demanding task at a time. When you attempt to multitask, you're actually rapidly switching between tasks, which creates cognitive friction and reduces performance quality on all activities. Elite performers embrace what researchers call monotasking, deleting their full cognitive resources to one important task until completion, or until they reach a natural transition point. This allows them to enter flow states and access deeper levels of cognitive processing. Attention residue management. Scientists have discovered that when you switch from one task to another, part of your attention remains stuck on the previous task. This attention residue reduces your cognitive capacity for the new task. Elite performers minimize attention residue through deliberate transition rituals that clear their mental workspace before engaging new challenges. Cognitive load optimization. Your brain has limited working memory capacity, typically 72 pieces of information. Elite performers understand this limitation and structure their thinking to optimize cognitive load. They externalize routine information, use systematic approaches to complex problems, and avoid overloading their mental bandwidth with unnecessary details. Deep work architecture. Elite performers create environmental and procedural systems that support sustained focus. They eliminate notification distractions, design workspaces that promote concentration, and establish routines that signal to their brain that it's time for deep cognitive engagement. Elite performers also understand the rhythm of focused attention. They know that attention operates in natural cycles and that trying to maintain peak focus continuously leads to mental fatigue and decreased performance. Instead, they use strategic focus intervals followed by specific recovery periods that actually enhance their next focus session. This principle, known as ultradian rhythms, suggests that the brain naturally operates in 90-minute cycles of high and low alertness. Elite performers align their most demanding cognitive work with their natural high alertness periods and use low alertness periods for routine tasks or recovery activities. The development of elite focus requires specific training protocols that most people never engage in attention training, like physical fitness. Attention can be strengthened through progressive training. Elite performers practice sustained attention exercises, starting with shorter periods and gradually increasing duration and intensity. They might begin with 15-minute focused sessions and progress to 4-hour deep work blocks. Distraction resistance. Instead of avoiding distractions entirely, elite performers train their ability to resist them. They deliberately practice maintaining focus in the presence of potential interruptions, building mental resilience that serves them in chaotic real-world environments. Attention switching. Elite performers also train their ability to rapidly shift focus when necessary. They practice moving cleanly between different types of cognitive tasks, maintaining performance quality during transitions. Mindfulness integration. Many elite performers incorporate mindfulness practices not for relaxation, but for attention training. Mindfulness meditation literally strengthens the brain circuits responsible for sustained attention and reduces the tendency toward mind-wandering. The research reveals that elite performers have developed what neuroscientists call cognitive control networks, brain systems that can override automatic habitual responses in favor of goal-directed behavior. This allows them to maintain focus even when their immediate impulses would lead them toward distractions. Perhaps most importantly, elite performers understand that attention is trainable. They don't accept their current attention span as fixed. They systematically work to expand their capacity for sustained focus. They treat attention training as seriously as an athlete treats physical conditioning. The modern world presents unprecedented challenges to sustained attention, but this actually creates greater opportunity for those who master focus. In an environment where most people are cognitively scattered, the ability to maintain deep focus becomes a massive competitive advantage. Elite performers aren't just better at focusing, they're operating with fundamentally different attentional capabilities. While others are surfing the shallows of scattered attention, they're diving deep into cognitive territories that produce breakthrough insights, elegant solutions, and superior performance. The moment that separates elite performers from everyone else isn't when everything is going smoothly, it's when the pressure is crushing, the stakes are highest, and lesser performers crumble. Elite minds have developed a fundamentally different relationship with pressure and stress, transforming what destroys most people into what elevates their performance to extraordinary levels. While the average person experiences stress as a threat that degrades their capabilities, elite performers have rewired their stress response system to interpret pressure as energy that can be channeled for enhanced performance. This isn't positive thinking or mental toughness. It's a systematic neurological reprogramming that changes how their brains and bodies respond to high-stakes situations. The science behind this transformation is revolutionary. When most people face pressure, Their sympathetic nervous system triggers the fight-or-flight response, flooding their body with stress hormones that narrow attention, impair complex thinking, and reduce fine motor control. This biological response was designed for physical survival threats, not for modern performance challenges. Elite performers have learned to activate what researchers call the challenge response instead of the threat response. In challenge mode, stress hormones still elevate, but they're accompanied by different neural and hormonal patterns that actually enhance cognitive function, improve focus, and increase resilience. The key difference lies in how elite performers interpret pressure situations. While most people focus on what they might lose: reputation, status, opportunity, elite performers focus on what they can gain: growth, learning, achievement. This cognitive reframing literally changes their physiology, transforming stress from a performance inhibitor into a performance enhancer. Asterisk. Elite performers understand several crucial principles about pressure that escape most people. Pressure as information. Instead of experiencing pressure as an emotional burden, elite performers use it as data. High pressure tells them that the situation is important, which helps them calibrate their level of preparation and focus accordingly. They don't try to eliminate pressure, they learn to decode and utilize it. Arousal optimization, peak performance, requires optimal arousal, not too little, which leads to complacency, and not too much, which leads to overwhelm. Elite performers have developed precise awareness of their optimal arousal state and specific techniques to reach and maintain that state regardless of external pressure. Asterisk. Stress inoculation. Elite performers deliberately expose themselves to pressure situations in training so that competition or high-stakes scenarios feel familiar rather than overwhelming. They practice under conditions that are actually more stressful than real performance situations, making actual pressure feel manageable by comparison. Present moment anchoring. When pressure mounts, most people's minds race toward catastrophic future scenarios or get hijacked by past failures. Elite performers have trained their attention to remain anchored in the present moment, where their skills and preparation can actually be applied. The neurological mechanisms that elite performers use to transform pressure include cognitive reappraisal. This is the ability to reframe stressful situations in ways that reduce their threat value while maintaining their motivational importance. Elite performers might reframe "I can't afford to fail" as "this is an opportunity to show what I'm capable of." Breathing regulation. Elite performers use specific breathing techniques that activate the parasympathetic nervous system, counterbalancing stress arousal with calming influences. These aren't relaxation techniques. They're performance optimization protocols that maintain ideal psychophysiological states. Attentional control. Under pressure, attention naturally narrows and becomes rigid. Elite performers have trained their ability to maintain flexible attention that can zoom in on critical details or zoom out for broader perspective as needed. Emotional granularity. While most people experience pressure as a general state of anxiety or stress, elite performers have developed precise emotional vocabulary that allows them to identify specific feeling states and respond appropriately. They might distinguish between excitement, nervousness, determination, and intensity, each requiring different optimization strategies. Elite performers also understand the temporal dynamics of pressure. They know that pressure typically builds before important events, peaks during critical moments, and requires specific recovery protocols afterward. They've developed stage-appropriate strategies for each phase. Pre-performance. Elite performers use this phase for final preparation, visualization, and arousal optimization. They don't try to relax completely. They calibrate their energy to match performance demands. During performance, their focus shifts entirely to execution. They've trained their minds to operate on automatic pilot for routine elements while maintaining conscious control over strategic decisions and adaptations. Post-performance. They engage in specific protocols to process the experience, extract lessons, and return their nervous system to baseline. This recovery phase is crucial for maintaining long-term performance capacity. Perhaps most importantly, elite performers have developed what psychologists call pressure privilege, the recognition that high-pressure situations are opportunities that most people will never experience. They understand that pressure is often a signal that they're operating at levels where significant achievement is possible. This reframe transforms pressure from something to be endured into something to be grateful for. Elite performers often report that their most pressure-filled moments become their most treasured memories, not because the pressure was pleasant, but because it allowed them to discover capabilities they never knew they possessed. The development of pressure mastery requires specific training that most people avoid. Elite performers deliberately seek out pressure situations, gradually increasing the intensity and complexity until their comfort zone expands to encompass scenarios that would overwhelm others. They also study their own pressure responses meticulously, identifying personal triggers, optimal pre-performance routines, and recovery protocols that work specifically for their unique psychology and physiology. The research is clear. Elite performers don't have less stress or pressure than others. They have different relationships with stress and pressure. They've transformed their stress response from a limiting factor into a performance multiplier, giving them access to heightened states of capability when it matters most. This transformation isn't just about sports or business performance. It's about life mastery. The ability to thrive under pressure determines how you handle job interviews, difficult conversations, creative challenges, and leadership moments. It's the difference between shrinking when life demands your best and rising to meet the moment with everything you've got. There exists a state of consciousness so powerful that elite performers across every domain, from athletes and artists to entrepreneurs and scientists, spend their entire careers trying to access it consistently. In this state, performance transcends normal limitations. Time seems to slow down or speed up. Self-consciousness disappears, and extraordinary achievements feel effortless. Psychologists call this flow state, but elite performers know it as something far more practical: the neurological configuration that produces their greatest breakthroughs, their most satisfying performances, and their moments of genuine genius. Flow isn't mystical or accidental. It's a specific neurological state that can be understood, accessed, and optimized through precise psychological and environmental engineering. Elite performers have decoded the formula for reliable flow state access, giving them a competitive advantage that goes beyond skill, knowledge, or effort. When your brain enters flow state, several remarkable changes occur simultaneously. Transient hypofrontality. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for self-criticism and conscious control, partially deactivates. This creates the effortless feeling of flow by reducing the mental interference that normally constrains performance. Altered time perception. The brain's time processing centers shift function, creating the sensation that time either slows down, allowing for enhanced reaction time and decision-making, or speeds up, making hours feel like minutes. Enhanced pattern recognition. The brain's pattern recognition systems become hyperactive, allowing for intuitive connections and insights that would be impossible in normal. Consciousness, optimized brain chemistry. Flow triggers the release of 5 powerful neurochemicals: norepinephrine, dopamine, endorphins, anandamide, and GABA, creating a cocktail that enhances focus, learning, creativity, and performance while reducing pain and anxiety. Elite performers understand that flow state isn't something that happens to them. It's something they engineer through specific preconditions and triggers. Challenge skill balance. Flow requires the perfect intersection of high challenge and high skill. If the challenge exceeds your skill level, you experience anxiety. If your skill exceeds the challenge, you experience boredom. Elite performers constantly calibrate this balance, seeking challenges that stretch their abilities without overwhelming them. Clear goals and immediate feedback, flow emerges. When you have crystal clear objectives and can immediately assess your progress toward those objectives. Elite performers structure their activities to provide continuous feedback loops that guide performance. Optimization in real time, complete concentration. Flow requires the total merging of attention with action. Elite performers eliminate all potential sources of distraction and create environmental conditions that support absolute focus on the task at hand. Sense of control. Flow occurs when you feel complete control over your actions and their outcomes. This doesn't mean controlling external circumstances. It means knowing that your skills are adequate for the challenge and that your preparation has been thorough. Asterisk. Elite performers have identified specific flow triggers that reliably induce this optimal state. Environmental triggers. These include high consequences, rich environments, unpredictability, and novelty. Elite performers deliberately expose themselves to situations that naturally promote flow states. Psychological triggers. These include intense focus, clear goals, immediate feedback, and the challenge-skill ratio. Elite performers structure their training and performance environments to maximize these conditions. Social triggers. These include shared goals, equal participation, familiar communication, and close proximity. Elite performers understand how to create group dynamics that promote collective flow states. Creative triggers. These include novelty, unpredictability, and complexity. Elite performers regularly expose themselves to new experiences and perspectives that stimulate creative flow states. The development of flow state mastery requires systematic training that most people never engage in. Flow state mapping. Elite performers study their own flow experiences meticulously, identifying the specific conditions, triggers, and practices that reliably produce flow for their unique psychology and activity domain. Progressive challenge calibration. They continuously adjust challenge levels to maintain the optimal balance between difficulty and capability, ensuring that their activities remain in the flow channel as their skills develop. Attention training. Since flow requires complete concentration, elite performers develop exceptional attentional control through specific focus training exercises and mindfulness practices. Recovery optimization. Flow states are neurologically demanding. Elite performers have developed sophisticated recovery protocols that restore their nervous system's capacity for future flow experiences. Perhaps most importantly, elite performers understand that flow state becomes more accessible with practice. They don't wait for flow to happen accidentally. They create conditions that make flow inevitable. They also recognize that different activities and contexts require different flow state configurations. The flow state of a surgeon performing complex surgery differs from the flow state of a musician improvising jazz, which differs from the flow state of an entrepreneur negotiating a crucial deal. Elite performers develop domain-specific flow protocols that account for the unique demands and characteristics of their particular field while leveraging universal flow principles. The research reveals that individuals who regularly access flow states experience enhanced performance. Tasks are completed with greater speed, accuracy, and innovation-accelerated learning. Skill acquisition occurs up to 250% faster in flow states. Increased Maru states increased. Creativity. Novel solutions and breakthrough insights emerge more frequently greater. Life satisfaction. Flow experiences are among the most meaningful and fulfilling moments in human experience. Tragedy is that most people rarely experience flow states, despite their enormous benefits. They remain trapped in anxiety when challenges exceed skills or boredom when skills exceed challenges. never finding the sweet spot where peak performance becomes possible. But elite performers have cracked this code. They've learned to engineer the psychological and environmental conditions that make flow states reliable rather than accidental. They've transformed peak performance from an occasional lucky break into a systematic capability that they can access on demand. This isn't just about professional achievement. It's about human potential. Flow states represent your brain operating at its highest level, accessing capabilities that remain dormant in normal consciousness. Learning to engineer these states reliably is perhaps the most powerful performance enhancement technology available. To human beings, elite performers aren't just better at their crafts. They're operating in fundamentally different states of consciousness that to amplify every aspect of their cognitive and physical capabilities. And now that you understand the flow state formula, you can begin engineering these peak performance states in your own life. The path to elite performance is paved with failure, setbacks, and obstacles that would break most people's spirits. What separates those who rise to extraordinary heights from those who give up isn't the absence of adversity. It's the presence of mental resilience, so robust that challenges become fuel rather than roadblocks. Elite performers don't experience less stress, fewer failures, or easier paths than others. In fact, they often face more intense pressures and higher stakes failures precisely because they're operating at levels where the consequences are magnified. The difference is that they've developed psychological armor that transforms adversity into advantage. Mental resilience isn't about toughness in the traditional sense. It's not about gritting your teeth and powering through pain. True resilience is a sophisticated psychological framework that allows you to maintain optimal performance even when circumstances are actively working against you. The neuroscience of resilience reveals that elite performers have developed several key brain adaptations, enhance stress recovery, while most people remain physiologically activated long after stressful events. Elite performers return to baseline functioning rapidly. Their nervous systems have been conditioned to process and release stress efficiently rather than accumulating chronic tension. Cognitive flexibility. Under pressure, resilient individuals maintain the ability to think creatively and strategically even when stressed. Their brains don't lock into rigid patterns when threatened. They remain adaptive and responsive. Optimized threat assessment. Elite performers have calibrated their threat detection systems to be sensitive to real dangers while filtering out false alarms. They don't waste mental energy on imaginary threats or minor inconveniences. Rapid learning. Integration. Resilient individuals process failure experiences quickly and extract actionable lessons without getting trapped in emotional rumination. They convert setbacks into strategic intelligence. The foundational components of elite mental resilience include anti-fragility. While most people aim to be resilient, returning to their original state after stress, elite performers develop anti-fragility, the ability to actually get stronger from stressors. They seek out challenges that would overwhelm others because they've learned to extract growth from adversity. Stoic acceptance. Elite performers have internalized the fundamental distinction between what they can control and what they cannot. They invest their mental energy exclusively in controllable factors, while accepting uncontrollable circumstances without emotional resistance. Identity, separation. Resilient performers separate their core identity from their performance outcomes. They understand that failing at something doesn't make them a failure, and succeeding at something doesn't define their worth. This separation protects them from the emotional volatility that destroys most people's consistency. Meaning-making. Elite performers have developed sophisticated frameworks for extracting meaning and purpose from difficult experiences. They don't just endure hardship, they transform it into fuel for growth, motivation, and deeper understanding. Resource regeneration. Resilient individuals understand that mental and emotional resources are finite and require active restoration. They've developed systematic approaches to renewing their psychological energy rather than depleting themselves through chronic stress. The development of unbreakable mental resilience requires specific training protocols. Controlled adversity. Exposure. Elite performers deliberately expose themselves to manageable levels of stress and failure in training environments. This stress inoculation builds psychological calluses that protect them during real-world challenges. Asterisk. Cognitive reframing mastery. They practice transforming negative interpretations into empowering perspectives. This isn't positive thinking. It's strategic perspective-taking that maintains motivation and learning orientation during difficult periods. Emotional regulation training. Resilient performers develop precise control over their emotional responses. They can experience the full range of human emotions without being controlled by them, extracting useful information while maintaining functional capacity. Recovery protocol implementation. They treat psychological recovery with the same systematic approach that athletes use for physical recovery. This includes specific practices for processing stress, restoring mental energy, and preparing for future challenges. Elite performers also understand the social dimension of resilience. They've built support networks that enhance rather than drain their psychological resources. Strategic relationship building. They surround themselves with people who challenge them to grow while providing emotional support during difficult periods. Mentor and peer networks. They maintain relationships with individuals who've overcome similar challenges and can provide perspective, guidance, and encouragement. Professional support systems. They're not afraid to work with coaches, therapists, or other professionals who can help optimize their mental health and performance capacity. Perhaps most importantly, elite performers have developed what psychologists call post-traumatic growth, the ability to not just recover from adversity, but to emerge stronger, wiser, and more capable than before. They view every setback as containing the seeds of future breakthrough. The research shows that mental resilience is highly trainable. The brain's capacity for stress management, emotional regulation, and cognitive flexibility can all be enhanced through specific practices and experiences. Elite performers don't have naturally superior resilience. They've systematically developed it. This resilience training often involves mindfulness and meditation. These practices strengthen the brain circuits responsible for emotional regulation and stress recovery while reducing reactivity to negative thoughts and emotions. Physical conditioning. Elite performers understand that physical and mental resilience are interconnected. They use exercise not just for physical fitness, but as training for mental toughness. Sleep optimization. Quality sleep is crucial for stress, recovery, and emotional regulation. Elite performers treat sleep as a performance technology rather than a luxury. Nutrition and recovery. They understand that psychological resilience is supported by physical health, including proper nutrition, hydration, and recovery practices. The ultimate goal of resilience training isn't to become emotionally numb or unnaturally tough. It's to develop the psychological flexibility to maintain optimal performance regardless of external circumstances. Elite performers can be vulnerable and human while remaining functionally unbreakable. Asterisk. Elite performers share one characteristic that immediately separates them from everyone else. They are obsessively committed to optimization. While most people settle for good enough and plateau at acceptable levels of performance, elite minds are driven by an insatiable hunger for improvement that borders on compulsion. This isn't perfectionism. Perfectionism is fear-based and often paralyzing. This is optimization obsession, a systematic, data-driven pursuit of incremental gains that compound into extraordinary results over time. Elite performers understand that in competitive environments, the difference between good and great is often measured in tiny margins that most people never even notice. The psychology of obsessive optimization is rooted in what researchers call growth mindset. But elite performers take this concept far beyond its popular understanding. They don't just believe they can improve. They've made improvement their primary identity and organizing principle. Elite performers approach optimization with scientific rigor, baseline measurement before they can improve anything. They establish precise baseline measurements of current performance. They track metrics that others ignore, measuring variables that seem insignificant to casual observers but prove crucial for peak performance. Variable isolation. They understand that improvement comes from systematically isolating and optimizing individual variables rather than making broad, unfocused changes. They might spend weeks optimizing their warm-up routine, their decision-making speed, or their recovery protocols. Controlled experimentation. Elite performers treat their development like a laboratory. They implement changes systematically, measure results objectively, and maintain rigorous documentation of what works and what doesn't. Marginal gains accumulation. They understand that small improvements, when compounded over time, create massive advantages. A 1% improvement might seem insignificant, but 1% better every day for a year results in being 37 times better. The domains that elite performers optimize include physical systems. Their bodies are precisely calibrated machines. They optimize their nutrition, sleep, exercise, and recovery with the attention to detail that others reserve for their most important projects. Cognitive processes. They systematically enhance their thinking speed, decision-making accuracy, pattern recognition, and learning efficiency through specific training protocols. Emotional regulation. They treat emotional optimization as seriously as physical conditioning, developing precise control over their psychological states and stress responses. Environmental design. They engineer their surroundings to support peak performance, eliminating friction and designing systems that make excellence easier and mediocrity harder. Skill development. They approach skill acquisition with methodical precision, breaking complex abilities into component parts and optimizing each element separately before integrating them into fluid performance. Time and energy management. They treat their attention and energy as finite resources to be allocated strategically rather than spent carelessly. Elite performers use sophisticated frameworks for optimization, the 80-20 analysis. They continuously identify which 20% of their activities produce 80% of their results, then ruthlessly eliminate or delegate low-impact activities, while doubling down on high-leverage behaviors. Bottleneck identification. They understand that systems are only as strong as their weakest component. They systematically identify and address performance bottlenecks rather than randomly improving strong areas. Feedback loop acceleration. They engineer rapid feedback mechanisms that allow them to detect and correct performance deviations immediately, rather than waiting for delayed results. Risk-adjusted optimization. They balance the potential gains from optimization against the risks of over-engineering or creating fragile systems that break under pressure. The Obsessive Optimizer's Toolkit includes data collection systems. Elite performers are meticulous data collectors. They track performance metrics, energy levels, mood states, environmental factors, and any other variables that might impact their results. Analysis protocols. They've developed systematic approaches to analyzing their data, identifying patterns, and extracting actionable insights from there. Performance information implementation frameworks. They use structured approaches to implementing optimizations, ensuring that changes are sustainable and don't create unintended negative consequences. Review and iteration cycles. They conduct regular reviews of their optimization efforts, celebrating gains while identifying new opportunities for improvement. Perhaps most importantly, Elite performers understand the psychology of sustainable optimization. They know that obsessive improvement can become counterproductive if it leads to burnout, analysis paralysis, or perfectionist paralysis. They manage this through optimization cycling. They alternate between periods of intensive improvement and periods of stable performance, allowing their systems to consolidate gains before pursuing new optimizations.